My hands are doing that thing again. I try to hold them flat against my knees to make the trembling stop. It helps, sometimes. If I press them hard enough against something solid, the vibration quiets down. Tonight, it's not helping. There's a Bible on the table in front of me. Open to Psalm 51, David's Psalm. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. I've read it so many times the spine falls open to it automatically now. The binding knows where I need to be even when I don't. I used to build Ford V8 engines with these hands. 9 years, UAW Local 600, Ford River Rouge Complex, Dearborn, Michigan. Motor line, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. I could feel through my palms when a component was seated wrong, 0.003 of an inch off tolerance, and something in my grip would tell me before the torque wrench confirmed it. My foreman, Earl Dupree, 61 years old, 14 years on the floor, hands like welding gloves, used to say, Darnell Washington has got the most honest hands in this plant. That was before I met a $5 piece of soap. That's what crack looks like when you first see it. A little off-white chip, the size of a pencil eraser, lighter than you'd expect. Nothing about it suggests it will end your marriage, take your children, eliminate 9 years of union seniority, and deliver you, 38 years later, to a 12 square meter room in Inkster, Michigan, with a radiator that sounds like an old man clearing his throat. Nothing about it looks like a demolition crew. I need to tell you about 1985, because when people hear crack epidemic Detroit, they construct a certain image. Let me tell you what that image gets wrong. In 1985, I was 26 years old. I had a wife named Evelyn. We met at Calvary Baptist Church in Brightmoor when I was 20 and she was 19. She sang soprano in the choir, and she smelled like Jergens lotion when she sat next to me in a pew, and I decided right then that I was going to marry her. I was serious about it. Wrote her name in the margin of the church program. She kept that program for 23 years. We had 2 children. Marcus, who was 7, obsessed with baseball cards, kept them sorted in plastic sleeves by league and year. And Deja, who was 4, who called spaghetti biscotti, and none of us ever corrected her because we loved the sound of it too much to let it go. We rented a house in Brightmoor, small, 3 bedrooms, a yard where Evelyn grew collard greens, a basement workshop where I fixed neighbors' cars on weekends and listened to the Tigers on the radio. I was a deacon at Calvary Baptist. I was the captain of the UAW plant baseball team. I made $640 every 2 weeks, union scale, with a pension building and full medical. I drove to work with the windows down in summer because I wanted to hear my neighborhood before I left it. By any measurement I knew how to apply to a life, I was building something real. Then Ford announced a temporary layoff in March of 1985. They called it temporary. That's the word I need you to hear. Temporary adjustment due to production restructuring. They said 6 to 8 weeks. They said UAW Local 600 would be notified about recall dates. They said, this is not permanent. This is not a reflection of your performance record. This is economics. 6 to 8 weeks became 3 months, then 4. The recall notices kept getting pushed. I had savings. We weren't in trouble, not yet. I fixed cars in the basement for cash. Evelyn picked up extra hours at the hospital cafeteria. We managed. But I was a 26-year-old man built for 8 hours of physical labor a day, and suddenly I had nothing to do with my body. No engines to assemble. No torque specifications to feel through my hands. No Earl Dupree telling me where I was needed. I was just sitting in my own house, in my own basement, with too much time and a brain that would not quiet down. That's when Roosevelt Jenkins came around. Rosie. We'd worked the motor line together for 3 years. Good man, I thought. Family man. His wife Charlene made the best macaroni and cheese at every company potluck. Real sharp cheddar, not the powdered kind. Rosie started showing up on Thursday nights with a few other guys from the line. Wendell Brown, Jimmy Okafor, and sometimes a kid named Terrence, who everybody called T-Bone. We'd play poker in the basement, quarters and dollar bills. nothing serious, something to do with our hands. In May of 1985, I don't remember the exact date, but the Tigers were winning that year and Jimmy had a radio going. Rosie pulled something out during a break in the game, set it on the card table next to the chips, a small pipe, and a little white chip wrapped in tinfoil. He said, "Just once, D, just to take the edge off. Just to take the edge off." I want you to understand something about those words. I had never used drugs in my life. I'd had a drink before, beer at UAW functions, a little bourbon at New Year's. I was a church deacon. I had a daughter who called pasta the wrong name, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world. I was not, by any reasonable measure, a person looking for something like this. But I was 4 months into a layoff with idle hands and a head full of pressure I had no language for. And the thing cost $5. Here's what I remember about the first time. The warmth hit in about 8 seconds. Not like alcohol. Not like anything I had a word for. A wave of something that could only be described as, everything is fine. Everything is fine, and it always has been fine. And you are fine. And your family is fine. And the layoff is nothing. And Ford will call you back. And you are a man who builds engines. And nothing can take that from you. That lasted about 12 minutes. Then it stopped. And when it stopped, something dropped. Hard. Like stepping off a ledge you didn't know was there. The room got colder than it was. The cards on the table seemed pointless. Rosie and the other guys were laughing at something, and their laughter sounded like it was coming from a building across the street. I sat in my own basement, feeling like I had just discovered that something was missing from me. Something I hadn't known was missing until 12 minutes ago showed me what it felt like to have it. That 12-minute window, and that drop. That is the precise mechanism of everything that followed. Every job lost, every morning missed, every Christmas ruined. All of it fits inside that gap between 12 minutes of fullness and the moment the fullness ends. Everything I did for the next 9 years was an attempt to get back across that gap. I want to use something I know. I spent 9 years on a motor line. I understand how engines are assembled. You start with nothing, an empty engine block, just a shell of cast iron, and you add, piece by piece, component by component, everything that makes it a functioning machine. The crankshaft, the bearings, the pistons, the connecting rods, the camshaft, the valves, the gaskets, the timing chain, the heads, the intake manifold. Each piece fitted to exact specification, each torqued to a defined measurement. When it came off the line, it was a complete Ford V8, a machine capable of 200 horsepower and 300,000 miles, if maintained correctly. We built something out of nothing. That's what I did. Every day for 9 years. Crack runs the same line in reverse. Not all at once. That's not how it works. And nobody tells you there's a schedule. What happens instead is, piece by piece, quietly, the components start coming off. You don't notice any single component going. You notice that something feels different, that you don't run as well as you used to, that the performance is below spec. You run diagnostics on yourself, and in the early months, the diagnostics always come back the same. You're fine. You just need more maintenance. The maintenance is the rock. The summer of 1985, I smoked crack 7 times. I told myself each time was the last time. Told myself it was because of the layoff. Told myself it was the pressure. There was always a reason that was not the rock. Ford called me back in September 1985. I went back to the line. Hands on iron, torque wrenches, Earl Dupree running quality checks. For about 6 weeks, I thought I was exactly where I needed to be. Told myself the thing in the basement was behind me. Then I started waking up at 2 a.m. and not being able to go back to sleep. Just lying there in the dark next to Evelyn. My heart going faster than it should have been. My brain running a loop I couldn't turn off. And what was on the loop was not the line, was not Marcus's baseball cards, was not Deja's Boschetti, was that 12-minute window and the drop. I started going out Thursday nights again, just Thursdays, just once a week. I told Evelyn I was at Jimmy Okafor's poker game. Technically, for part of the night, that was true. By spring of 1986, it was twice a week. By fall of 1986, it was not Rosie's basement anymore. Rosie had fallen in too deep. Charlene had found out, and they were having serious trouble. And eventually, Rosie just disappeared from my life, the way certain people do when they're ashamed, and there's nothing to say about it. I found my way to a parking lot off Plymouth Road, near the 7-Eleven on the corner. A kid named Lil C operated there, 17 years old maybe, never knew his real name. He called me boss man every time. I was 27 years old, a union man with a wife and 2 children, buying rocks from a 17-year-old in a parking lot. By 1987, I was going to Lil C's lot every day. Here is the arithmetic that crack creates for you, and will not let you see while it's creating it. 15 to 20 rocks a day at peak. Each rock was $5. That's $75 to $100 a day going to a teenager in a parking lot on Plymouth Road. My UAW take-home, after taxes and dues, was roughly $260 a week. I was spending $350 to $500 a week on crack. The mathematics did not work. I knew the mathematics did not work. I had been running plant quality calculations in my head for 9 years. But the mathematics of crack is not the same as the mathematics of engines. In the mathematics of crack, the correct answer is always one more rock. One more is always solvable. The rent, the groceries, the overdue electric bill, those were future problems. The rock was a right now problem. Right now always won. I started borrowing from the mortgage, small amounts at first. Told myself I'd replace it before the bill. Replaced it twice. The third time, I didn't replace it. I started missing days at Ford. Not many at first, 1 or 2 a month. By 1987, it was averaging 3 to 4 days a month. Earl Dupree called me into his office in November of that year. Closed the door, sat across from me and said quietly, "Darnell, I don't know what's going on, but I need you to talk to me." I looked Earl Dupree in the eyes, a man who had known me for 6 years, a man who had said I had the most honest hands in his plant. I said I'd been having some family stress, would be better soon. He looked at me for a long moment. He knew. I don't have any doubt about that now. He knew, or he knew enough, and he gave me the chance to tell him the rest. I didn't take it. We shook hands and I went back to the line. 3 months later, Ford terminated my employment, February 1988. 6 documented absences and 2 incidents of failure to meet quality standards. 9 years. UAW Local 600. Earl Dupree's most honest hands. Out. I need to tell you about Christmas of 1988. Evelyn knew by this point that something was wrong. She didn't know exactly what. I was still lying. Still running a version of the story where I was having some trouble and getting it sorted out. She believed me because Evelyn was the kind of woman who chose, for as long as she possibly could, to believe in the people she loved. And because the alternative, the actual truth, was not something she was prepared to say out loud yet. Marcus was 10 that year. Deja was 7. Evelyn had put presents under the tree. Not many. Money was gone. The savings were gone. We were behind on the rent. I'd been fired 10 months earlier and hadn't told her the real reason. But she'd managed. Marcus got a new mitt. And Deja's big present was a radio. Small pink thing, battery powered. Deja's grandmother, Evelyn's mother, Mama Ruth, had picked it out and written Deja's name on the back in black Sharpie. D-E-J-A, block letters. I saw it under the tree on December 23rd. On December 24th, I pawned it. $40. Bought 7 rocks. Came home on Christmas morning with empty pockets and went directly to the bathroom and sat on the floor and smoked while my children were in the living room opening presents. I was in that bathroom for 2 hours. I've thought about those 2 hours every day for 38 years. Every single day. The specific quality of what I was doing. The deliberateness of it. My children were on the other side of a door, and I was on the bathroom floor, and I knew where I was, and I chose to stay. When I came out, Marcus was standing in the hallway, 10 years old, his serious eyes. He looked at me the way a child looks at something he's been trying to understand for a long time and still can't. He said, "Dad, are you okay?" I said, "I'm fine, son. I'm fine." Evelyn left in August of 1989. She took Marcus, who was 11, and Deja, who was 8. She'd found out about the radio in April. Mama Ruth had asked about it during a Sunday visit, and the lie came apart the way lies do when you've been maintaining too many of them and you run out of the energy to keep them all standing. Evelyn confronted me. I didn't deny it. I don't know why, at that particular moment, I stopped lying. Maybe I was tired. Maybe something inside me that still resembled the man she'd married decided that she at least deserved to know the real thing she was leaving. She packed what she could fit and took the children to her mother's house in Inkster. I know now that Deja cried the entire drive. Marcus sat in the back and didn't cry at all. He was 11 years old, and he'd spent the last 2 years being the man of a house whose father wasn't. He didn't have anything left to cry with. I didn't try to stop them from leaving. I was thinking about Little C's parking lot. The years between 1989 and 1994 are not fully mine to tell, meaning I was there, but I was not present for most of them. I lived in places I will not name, with people I will not describe, doing things that the 26-year-old deacon from Brightmoor could not have imagined in his own nature. The Rock had taken the engine completely apart by then. No crankshaft, no pistons, no timing chain, no valves. Just the empty block, still standing, still shaped like an engine, but hollow. There is something nobody tells you about long-term crack addiction that is more frightening than the physical destruction. It removes your capacity to feel, not all at once, not dramatically. It happens in increments so small you don't notice any single one going. And then one day, something occurs that should produce an emotion in a functioning human being, grief or love or pride or fear, and you notice that the response isn't there. You can observe, analytically, that this event should produce an emotion, but the machinery that generates the emotion has been removed from the system. In 1992, I heard through someone I knew from the streets that Marcus had made the varsity baseball team at his school in Inkster, shortstop. The man who told me described it like he assumed I would be proud, like that was information I was entitled to receive as a form of joy. I tried to feel proud. I produced something on my face that looked like pride, but what was underneath it was nothing, a flat note where something should have been vibrating. The capacity to be his father, not just the practical reality of being absent, but the emotional machinery that would have let me grieve for what I'd stopped being, had been removed. That scared me more than anything, more than losing the job, more than losing Evelyn, more than the rooms and the streets and the things I won't describe. The crack had not just taken my life, it had taken my ability to register what it had taken. I got clean for the first time in 1994. NA program, a church basement in Ypsilanti, folding chairs, bad coffee, a man named Calvin Briggs, 54 years old, 15 years clean, who had the most patient face I'd ever seen on another human being. He never told me it would be easy. He never told me I deserved to be forgiven. He just kept showing up on Thursday nights with bad coffee and said, "You're here. That's today. Today is enough." 11 months clean, then a funeral. A man I'd known from the streets, not someone I was close to, just a familiar face that was gone now. And I left the reception and found my way back to Plymouth Road. Lil C was long gone by then, but there's always someone on Plymouth Road. There's always someone. I'll spare you the full arithmetic of the relapses. There were several between 1994 and 2001. They followed the same pattern, a period of clean time, 4 months, 7 months, once almost 14 months, and then a single moment of proximity to the right circumstances, and the loop would start again. Crack doesn't forget you. It doesn't hold a grudge, and it doesn't celebrate your return. It's just still there, patient, the way it has always been patient. The last time I used was March 11th, 2003. I know the exact date because I wrote it on a card the next morning, and I have kept that card in my wallet ever since. I had it laminated at a FedEx Kinko's in 2004 when the ink started to fade. 23 years, 4 months, and 2 days as of tonight. I go to an NA meeting every Thursday at First United Methodist in Inkster. 7 p.m. Same bad coffee, same folding chairs, a rotating group of people who understand what it means to live alongside something that does not go away. My hands still shake. The doctors explain it with terminology, something about dopaminergic pathways and long-term neurological sequelae. What they're saying, in language I understand, is when you remove key components from a precision engine and run it without them for 9 years, certain functions never fully restore. The tolerances are permanently off. 2 stents in my heart, put in at Henry Ford Hospital in 2019. The cardiologist, a woman named Dr. Patel, who was born the year I started at Ford River Rouge, explained that my coronary arteries had narrowed at a rate consistent with chronic stimulant use over an extended period. She delivered this matter-of-factly, the way doctors deliver information about the past as if it is weather you can no longer change. I told her I'd been clean for 16 years at that point. She said, "That's great. The damage is still there. My teeth are gone. Full upper plate since 2015. The crack, the actual chemical composition of the smoke, the temperature, the pH, destroys enamel at a rate that dentistry cannot keep up with in active users." I didn't understand that in 1987. Nobody on Plymouth Road was explaining dental chemistry. I coughed from October through March, every winter. The pulmonologist calls it significant changes consistent with prolonged inhalation of combustion products. He says it like a notation in a file. To me, it sounds like what it is. The sound of smoke I breathed in 30 years ago still living in my lungs. Marcus calls on my birthday, January, and on Christmas Day, 10 minutes each time. He lives in Atlanta now. He has a wife named Tamara and 2 kids, grandchildren I've seen in photographs he sent once, years ago. He works in logistics. He sounds, when he calls, exactly like a man who has made peace with something that still costs him to carry. The conversations are polite. They are warm in the way that professionally warm conversations are warm. The warmth of someone who has decided to be decent even when decency is not free. 10 minutes on Christmas, 10 minutes in January. Deja doesn't call. The last time I spoke to Deja was 2007. She was getting married. A man from her church in Inkster. By all accounts, a good man. I hope a good man. And I was not there. I had what I told myself was a reason. I've been through enough recovery to know a justification when I'm making one. I was not there. She has not spoken to me since. She is 44 years old. I don't know what her children's names are. I don't know if she still lives in Inkster. I don't know if she looks like Evelyn or if she still calls pasta the wrong name. I have a photograph of her at age 6, school uniform, Brightmoor Elementary, standing in front of the house on a fall morning with a smile that still had all her baby teeth. The photo has been in my wallet for 38 years. I had it laminated in 2004. Same trip to the FedEx Kinko's as the sobriety card, because I was afraid the paper would fall apart before I did. The lamination is starting to crack at the corners, starting to peel. I press it flat with my thumb sometimes trying to seal it back. It doesn't hold. P.S. Evelyn died in 2018. Diabetes complications. She was 57 years old. I found out 3 weeks after it happened. A woman from the old Calvary Baptist congregation called someone who eventually got the information to me. 3 weeks. She'd been buried 3 weeks by the time I knew. I've sat with what I felt about that for 8 years. I still don't have an honest answer that isn't also partially a lie. I know that I sat in this same kind of chair. I was at a different SRO then, over on Michigan Avenue, but the same kind of chair, the same kind of room, and I held the information and tried to locate the appropriate response to it. We hadn't spoken in almost 20 years. She had rebuilt her life. She'd raised our children. She'd worked her job at the hospital cafeteria for 26 years, retiring in 2012. She'd remarried, I believe. She'd kept her garden. She was a woman who believed in people past the point where belief was rational. She believed in me for 4 years while I was actively destroying everything she had built with me. And then, correctly, she stopped. What I felt, sitting in that chair in 2018, was not grief exactly. It was more like the last door closing. While it was still standing open, there was a room on the other side. When it closes, there's just wall. I should have called her. I thought about it every year, and I didn't. I told myself she'd moved on, and a call from me would only reopen something. I told myself I was protecting her. I've had 23 years of recovery and 8 years since she died to understand what I was actually protecting. The radiator in this room sounds like a man clearing his throat. It does it approximately every 7 minutes. I have counted. Room 14, Maple SRO Hotel, Inkster, Michigan. 12 square meters, 1 bed, 1 plastic chair, 1 small table, 1 amber lamp, a television that works intermittently, a bathroom down the hall, shared with whoever else is on this floor. $380 a month. This is the terrifying fate of surviving, not the poverty. The poverty is what it is. I've made a kind of peace with the arithmetic of it. What's terrifying is the other arithmetic, the arithmetic of what you left behind. Marcus, 10 minutes, twice a year. Deja, nothing. Evelyn, 3 weeks too late, a $5 rock. I think about the engines I built, the Ford V8s that came off the River Rouge line and went into trucks and cars that are probably still running somewhere. I think about the fact that those engines outlasted my marriage, outlasted my career, outlasted Evelyn. They're still doing what they were designed to do, turning at correct tolerances, delivering power within spec, maintained by people who don't know my name. I didn't maintain myself as carefully as I maintained them. That's not a metaphor. That's just the measurement. I read Psalm 51 most nights. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness. David wrote it after the worst thing he ever did. The commentaries say it's a psalm of genuine contrition, not a performance, not a petition for a lighter sentence. Just, I know what I did. I know what it costs. I'm still here. I don't know what to do with still being here except acknowledge it. Deja's photograph is on the table next to the Bible, the lamination cracking at the corners. I press it flat with my thumb. I should get it relaminated. I keep meaning to.